She stormed into my tent and started stripping her armor. The storm had been raging for hours, tearing at the fabric of my tent as though nature itself wanted me exposed. The rain came down in sheets, the wind howled like a wounded beast, and every flash of lightning painted the world in stark white scars. I thought I was alone out there in the wilderness, clinging to nothing but a handful of rations and the hope that morning would arrive. Alone, yes. But I was wrong. My name is McCall, and that night would change everything I thought I knew about the universe, about survival, about the very definition of trust. Because that night, she stormed into my tent. The flap burst open with a force that nearly ripped the stakes from the ground. I flinched back, heart hammering in my chest, expecting maybe a scavenger, maybe a soldier, maybe death itself. But what came inside was none of those things. She was tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in armor that hissed and sparked as if alive. Rain steamed off her plates as though fire burned beneath. Her breathing was ragged, heavy, each exhale echoing with something not entirely human. Her eyes found me in the dark, glowing, luminescent, unnatural. They locked onto mine with a heat that burned through the chill of the storm. My first thought was terror. My second, disbelief. She wasn't one of us. She wasn't even from here. And then she moved. She reached up, gauntleted fingers working furiously at the clasps along her chest plate. Metal ground against metal, the sound sharp, desperate. At first I thought she was drawing a weapon, that she'd strike me down where I crouched. My hand darted to the knife at my side, every nerve screaming for me to run. But then I realized she wasn't attacking. She was stripping, not out of vanity, not out of choice, but out of necessity. Her armor smoked, sizzling where the storm's lightning had scorched it. The suit was killing her, overheating, burning against her skin. She clawed at it with frantic precision, tearing away the weight that bound her. Piece by piece, the metal fell to the ground, clattering against the floor of my tiny shelter. First the chest plate, then the shoulders, then the gauntlets. Each fragment revealed more of the being beneath, skin marked with strange, shimmering patterns that seemed to shift in the half-light, as though alive with their own energy. I should have been horrified. I should have screamed, thrown myself into the storm, taken my chances with the lightning and the wolves. But I didn't. I just watched, frozen, as if some part of me knew this moment was bigger than fear. Her breathing slowed as the final piece of her helmet clattered to the ground. For the first time, I saw her face. Zoe. That's the name she would later give me, though in that first instant, she was only a storm-worn stranger, alien and impossible. Her features were sharp, sculpted with a symmetry that no human could claim, yet softened by exhaustion, by pain. A scar traced along her jaw, proof that she had fought battles far from my world, and her eyes still glowing, but now less fierce, more searching. She didn't speak right away. She only stood there, stripped of her armor, stripped of the image of invincibility her kind carried into our skies. And in that silence, in that fragile pause where predator and prey became simply two beings trapped in the same storm, I understood something I could never unlearn. The universe had just stepped into my life, and nothing would ever be the same. I stumbled back as she shed the last of the armored plates, my hand fumbling for the knife strapped to my side. Every instinct screamed at me. She's dangerous. She's not human. She doesn't belong here. My knuckles whitened around the hilt, sweat sliding across my palm despite the storm's chill. The tent seemed suddenly smaller, suffocatingly close. The space between us, barely a few feet, felt like the edge of a battlefield. Her chest rose and fell in labored rhythm, steam rising from her scorched armor scattered around us like the broken shell of some great insect. Sparks fizzled against the damp floor. For a moment she didn't look at me. Her eyes closed, her face twisted with pain, as though every breath cost her something. Then they snapped open, glowing once more, pinning me where I stood. I tightened my grip on the knife. "What the hell are you?" I muttered, voice shaking more than I wanted. Her lips parted. For the first time, words escaped her. Halting, clumsy, strange. "Hot. Suit. Burn. Must. Remove." Her accent was thick, each syllable a fractured shard of language. But I understood enough. She wasn't stripping out of pride or threat or some twisted game. She was fighting her own armor, fighting to survive. Still, my heart thrashed against my ribs. She could be lying. She could be a scout, a deserter, a killer. Every story we'd heard about them ended in fire and ruin. And yet, here she was, trembling, exposed, fighting not me but herself. She reached for her side, and I tensed instantly, knife flashing upward. But instead of a weapon, she tugged at another latch on her thigh guard. The metal hissed as it slid free, revealing more of her skin. Skin marked with glowing, shifting lines like constellations alive beneath her flesh. It wasn't seductive. It wasn't meant to be. And yet I couldn't tear my eyes away. The rawness of it, the vulnerability, the sheer alien reality of someone so powerful brought low by their own survival gear. It made my pulse pound harder than any battlefield. She saw the knife in my hand. Her gaze flicked to it, then to my eyes. Slowly, deliberately, she extended her other hand, revealing a weapon of her own. Sleek, curved, unmistakably lethal. She didn't raise it. She didn't point it at me. She only kept it visible, a silent reminder. You don't trust me. I don't trust you. Let's not forget what we're capable of. We stood like that, two figures poised between violence and silence. The storm outside shrieked, but inside the louder sound was the ragged beat of my breath. Finally, I spoke again. Why here? Why me? What do you want? She blinked, words slow, broken, like a child learning to speak. Not enemy, not scout. No, mission. Her hand pressed to her chest over the glowing lines. Alive, stay. Alive, a deserter, then. Or maybe just a survivor like me. My grip on the knife eased, barely, but the blade stayed ready. I couldn't drop it. Not yet. She removed the last of the thigh guards and slumped against the tent wall, exhaustion spilling over her body like a tide. Without the armor, she looked different, less towering, less invincible. Her limbs still carried strength, but they trembled, betraying weakness. She exhaled long and slow, closing her eyes for a fleeting second. The knife wavered in my hand. This is insane, I told myself. She could kill you in a blink. She could call her kind here. She could end you, but she hadn't. She opened her eyes again, scanning me carefully. Then with surprising slowness, she placed her alien weapon on the ground beside her. Not within my reach, not fully abandoned, but lowered a gesture. A truce, temporary and fragile. I didn't mirror her. The knife stayed in my hand. She noticed, but she didn't protest. Instead, she leaned back, head tilting against the tent fabric, strands of her hair, damp metallic silver, clinging to her face. Silence settled, heavy and uncomfortable. I wanted to speak, but every word caught in my throat. I wanted to demand answers, to scream at her, to know why she'd come crashing into my life, into my tent, into my world. But all I could do was stare, transfixed by the impossible. Her voice broke the silence again, quiet, halting. Name, you. The question threw me. My mouth opened before my brain could stop it. Makal. Her lips curved barely into something between a frown and a smile. Mac, Al. She repeated it carefully, as if tasting the syllables, as if trying them on. Then her hand pressed to her chest again. Zoe. Zoe. The name was like a crack of light through the storm. Simple, human almost, and yet foreign, carrying weight I couldn't begin to understand. We stared at one another, our names hanging in the air like a fragile thread connecting two worlds that should never have touched. I lowered the knife a fraction, just a fraction, enough for her to see I wasn't about to lunge. She gave a small nod, her glowing eyes softer now, though never entirely gentle. They still carried the fire of something ancient, something dangerous, but also something weary. Minutes dragged into hours. The storm outside raged, battering the earth, but inside we sat in uneasy silence. Two strangers, two enemies, bound by necessity. She shifted occasionally, checking the wounds the armor had left, her markings flickering faintly with each movement. I caught myself staring more than once, trying to decode what they meant. Rank? Identity? Something sacred? But I didn't ask. Not yet. Instead, I sat there with the knife in hand, pulse unsteady, thoughts unraveling. Was she lying? Was this all a trick? Or had fate really thrown me into a tent with the one alien who didn't want to kill me? I didn't know, but I did know one thing. The storm outside no longer felt like the greatest danger. The storm inside this tent, between her and me, that was far more dangerous and far harder to survive. The storm outside clawed at the earth with savage fury, but inside that thin canvas shelter, the world had gone unnervingly still. Zoe sat slumped against the wall, her armor scattered in broken pieces around her, steam still curling faintly from the scorched metal. She no longer looked like the invincible warrior who had burst into my tent. She looked mortal, weary. And that was when I noticed them, her markings. Strange, luminous patterns swirled across her bare skin, alive with a faint, pulsing glow that flickered in rhythm with her breath. They weren't scars, though at first they resembled them. They weren't tattoos either. Too alive, too dynamic. They shifted subtly, like constellations rearranging themselves across her flesh. Each line curved into another, forming sigils that hummed with meaning I could not comprehend. I forced my eyes to linger only briefly, reminding myself that staring could be seen as threat or insult. But one symbol in particular caught my attention. An intricate spiral across her left shoulder, surrounded by smaller runes. Even without understanding their language, I felt weight in them, importance. She caught me looking. Her eyes narrowed, glowing faintly as the stormlight flickered through the tent seams. For an instant, I thought she'd snarl or reach for her weapon again. Instead, she pressed 2 fingers against the marking on her shoulder and tapped it, then touched her chest. Slowly, haltingly, she formed the word, exile. The syllables were clumsy in her mouth, but the meaning hit me hard. Exile, cast out, banished. So she wasn't just running from the storm, she was running from them. I wanted to ask questions, 1,000 of them clawing at my throat. Why was she exiled? What crime had stripped her of armor and rank? What would her people do if they found her here? But the words tangled and died before reaching my lips. Questions could wait. Survival couldn't. That's when I saw the wound. Along her side, just beneath the strange constellation marks, a dark gash streaked across her ribs. Blood, not red, but deep violet, seeped sluggishly from it, staining her skin. The armor must have split under a lightning strike, tearing into her flesh. I froze. My hand twitched toward the small med kit buried in my pack, but my mind hesitated. Helping her would mean letting down my guard, turning my back, lowering my weapon. If she was lying about exile, if this was all some ploy, I'd be offering her the perfect opening. Yet something about the wound gnawed at me. She hadn't hidden it. She hadn't tried to pretend strength she didn't have. She just sat there, chest rising and falling shallowly, violet blood trickling down her side. I clenched my jaw, torn. Do I risk helping her? Do I risk not helping her? Before I could decide, she moved. Not toward her weapon, not toward me, but toward a small pouch strapped at her waist. She unhooked it with slow, deliberate motions, careful not to provoke my blade. My grip tightened anyway, ready to strike if she drew something lethal. But instead of a weapon, she pulled out food. A small bundle wrapped in some alien material, faintly shimmering like woven crystal. She opened it, revealing dark strips of something, meat, plant, that glistened faintly in the low light. The smell hit me first, smoky, tangy, unlike anything I'd known, but undeniably food, sustenance. She tore off a strip and bit into it, chewing slowly, her eyes never leaving mine. Then without a word, she extended the pouch toward me. I blinked, caught off guard. "What is this?" I muttered under my breath, though I knew she wouldn't understand. Her only response was a small gesture, urging, an offer, a truce sealed not in words but in food. The knife trembled in my hand. Sharing food, that was primal. It meant trust, peace, however fragile. Yet every instinct in me rebelled. What if it's poison? What if it's some test? But then again, what if it wasn't? Slowly, cautiously, I lowered my knife, just enough to free my other hand. I reached out and took one strip from the pouch. Her eyes followed every motion, sharp but expectant. The meat, or whatever it was, felt oddly warm against my fingers, as though alive. My stomach clenched, screaming hunger I'd ignored for hours. I hesitated a heartbeat longer, then bit down. The taste exploded across my tongue, rich, smoky, savory in a way that defied description. My body responded instantly, every muscle humming with renewed energy. Whatever this was, it wasn't poison. It was nourishment, real food. A breath I hadn't realized I was holding escaped me. "Not bad," I muttered softly. She tilted her head, watching me. Then slowly she allowed herself the faintest smile. We ate in silence, passing the pouch back and forth like two soldiers sharing rations in the mud. Each bite softened the edges of fear, dulled the razor-wire tension that had gripped the air. Outside, lightning split the sky again, thunder rolling like cannon fire across the earth. But inside, the storm seemed distant. Here, in this fragile shelter, two worlds had paused their war for the simple act of eating together. My eyes drifted to her wound again. She caught me looking. This time she didn't bristle. She didn't hide it. Instead, she lifted a strip of the strange food and pressed it gently against the gash, as though using it as a poultice. The glowing runes across her skin flickered faintly, responding to the touch. I realized then, it wasn't just food, it was medicine, sustenance, and healing bound together. I leaned back, knife resting across my knees, and studied her. Not as an enemy, not as a threat, but as something different, something unknown. Her exile, her markings, her food, it all painted a picture I couldn't yet understand. She caught me staring again and tilted her head, curious now instead of wary. For the first time, her expression wasn't carved from suspicion or pain. It was softer, questioning, almost human. The storm thundered outside, but inside the silence between us felt less hostile now, less suffocating. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it wasn't war either. It was something fragile, something new. Two worlds trapped in the same tent, two strangers sharing food while lightning tore the night apart. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt the faint stirrings of something I hadn't allowed myself in a long time. Hope. The storm eased by degrees, though the sky outside still roared with distant thunder. The tent sagged under the weight of rain, but the pounding lessened to a steady rhythm. For the first time in hours, silence settled between us. Not uneasy this time, but heavy with everything left unsaid. Zoe sat across from me, her markings glowing faintly in the dim light. The food was gone. The fire in my gut it sparked had eased the hunger, but not the questions gnawing at my mind. Exile, wounded, alone. She hadn't killed me. She'd even shared food with me. But none of that erased the truth of who she was. An alien, an invader. Part of the very force that had scorched villages, shattered cities, and turned whole countrysides into smoldering ash. I found myself blurting the question before caution could stop me. "Why are you here?" Her head tilted slightly, like she hadn't expected me to ask so directly. Her glowing eyes narrowed, searching my face as though weighing whether I deserved an answer. Finally, she touched her chest, over the glowing lines again. "Mission gone." Her words came slowly, halting but clearer than before. "They want Earth. All resources." She paused, pressing her hand harder, eyes lowering. "Yeah, not life, not people. Just take." The words struck like a hammer. They weren't new. Not really. Everyone suspected it. Everyone knew the invaders hadn't come for friendship. But hearing it from her lips, it burned. I swallowed hard, my hand clenching around the knife still resting on my knee. "So you were part of it. You came here to take everything from us." Her eyes flicked up, sharp and pained. "No, stop. Leave. No more." She thumped her chest once, hard like a soldier rejecting orders. "I say, no conquest, no burn, Wrong, her words faltered, but the weight in them was unmistakable. She wasn't just wounded. She wasn't just lost. She had walked away from her people. For a heartbeat, I didn't know whether to believe her. If she was lying, it was the perfect deception. Get me to trust her, use me, betray me when the time was right. Humanity would call me a traitor, a fool, a collaborator with the enemy. Even if she was telling the truth, what then? Could I trust one deserter? Could one voice outweigh the billions her people threatened to destroy? I pressed the knife tighter against my leg, trying to ground myself. Even if you're telling the truth, do you know what they've done to us? My people? My home? Her gaze met mine, unwavering. Then to my shock, she reached for one of the markings along her side, tracing it slowly with a finger. The glow dimmed as her touch passed, almost like it was responding to shame. I saw, she said quietly, cities, fire, children, gone. Her English cracked under the weight of the words, but the meaning was clear. She wasn't blind to the cost. She carried it like a scar. I didn't realize I was shaking until I felt my hand tremble on the knife. Then why did you come here? Why me? Zoe's lips parted, but before she could answer, the tent shuddered. At first I thought it was just the storm returning, but then I heard it, an unnatural hum, vibrating low through the ground. Not thunder, not wind. Engines. She froze. Every muscle in her body tightened, markings flaring brighter. Her weapon was in her hand in an instant, though she didn't aim it at me. She aimed at the ground, at the noise outside. I crawled to the flap of the tent, slowly lifting it just an inch. My breath caught. Outside, moving shadows rippled across the landscape. Dark figures, tall and armored, their outlines illuminated by faint blue lights along their bodies. They moved with mechanical precision, scanning the ground with devices that hummed in rhythm with the engines. Alien patrol, searching. For her. I let the flap fall shut, turning back to her in a rush. They're out there. She nodded sharply, already crawling toward me. She pointed at the dim glow of her own markings, then at the tent wall, then drew her hand across her throat in a swift gesture. Too bright, too obvious. I understood. If they saw her glow, we were dead. Without thinking, I reached out and grabbed her wrist, pulling her close into the darkest corner of the tent. She stiffened at the touch, weapon half raised, but when the hum outside deepened, she didn't pull away. The two of us pressed into the narrow space, shoulder to shoulder, chest to chest. I could feel the heat of her skin, the steady rise and fall of her breath, the faint hum of energy that seemed to vibrate from her very body. Her eyes glowed faintly inches from mine, and for the first time, I prayed they would dim. The patrol stopped outside. Boots crunched against wet earth. A beam of pale light swept across the ground, sliding over the flap of the tent, spilling faint illumination inside. My heart stopped. Zoe's hand clamped over mine, pressing the knife flat against my thigh. Not to disarm me. No, it was something else. Her grip was strong, firm, steady, as if willing me not to shake, not to give us away. I didn't breathe. Neither did she. The shadows lingered, scanning, searching. I could hear the alien voices, low, guttural, mechanical through their helmets. Words I couldn't understand, but intent I could. They were hunting. Seconds stretched into eternity. My chest burned from holding breath. Every fiber of me screamed to move, to act, to run. But Zoe's hand kept mine still, her eyes locked on mine. In that fragile silence, I realized the truth. She was just as terrified as I was. Finally, the hum shifted. The patrol moved on, their lights sweeping away into the storm. The crunch of their boots faded into the distance, until only rain remained. I exhaled sharply, collapsing back against the wall of the tent. Zoe did the same, her markings flickering like a heartbeat finally calming. We sat there for a long moment, pressed close, neither of us speaking. The storm outside had returned, but inside something had shifted. Not peace, not yet, but something stronger than truce, stronger than food shared, stronger than names exchanged. A bond forged not in words but in the silence of hiding together, in the shared terror of discovery. I looked at her, still inches away, and saw not just the alien warrior who had stormed into my life, but the exile, the deserter, the survivor. Someone who had chosen defiance over blind conquest. For the first time, I let the knife slip from my hand and clatter softly onto the floor. And for the first time, she didn't reach for her weapon. The storm had quieted to a steady drizzle, but the silence inside the tent was far from calm. My knife lay forgotten on the floor. Zoe sat across from me, her weapon idle, her markings pulsing faintly like a heartbeat written on her skin. For the first time since she'd crashed into my world, there was nothing between us but choice. And choice, I realized, was heavier than any blade. She sat forward slowly, her body tense with exhaustion, but her eyes locked on mine. The words came halting, each one pulled out of her like stone from the earth. Stay here, or return. Her hand lifted, gesturing outward toward the storm, toward the alien patrols that still stalked the land. Her fingers curled into a fist. My people, call, demand, destroy. She paused, chest heaving with a sigh, before lowering her hand again. But here, her eyes flicked to me, searching, steady. Not different. I swallowed, unsure if I wanted her to continue, unsure if I wanted to know which way she would choose. You're saying you'd give it up? Your mission, your people, everything? Just to stay here? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Her lips pressed into a thin line, her markings flickering dimly as though reflecting her hesitation. Then she leaned closer. Her voice dropped, soft but unyielding. Your world, worth saving. She paused, eyes burning into mine, with a fire that wasn't human, but wasn't alien either. Something in between, something raw, something true. Because of you. The words hit me harder than the storm ever could. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to feel. I'd spent my life believing that her kind were monsters, invaders who saw us as insects beneath their boots. Yet here she was, exile, deserter, warrior stripped of armor and pride, telling me that my world, my life, was worth defying everything she'd known. It should have been impossible, but I believed her. Before I could answer, the ground trembled. The flap of the tent shivered as a low hum rose again, closer this time, heavier. The unmistakable vibration of engines, weapons, and armored boots in perfect unison. Zoe stiffened, her weapon snapping back into her hand. The glow of her markings brightened instinctively, betraying her position. She cursed under her breath in her own tongue, the syllables harsh and jagged. I crawled to the flap, peering through the narrow slit. My stomach dropped. They were back. Alien soldiers fanned across the hillside, their searchlights cutting through rain and smoke. Their armored forms loomed like shadows come alive, scanning every corner, every ruined shelter. The storm had masked us before, but now they were hunting with intent. The ground vibrated harder as they moved closer. My tent was no fortress. One sweep of their scanners and they'd find us. I turned back to Zoe, panic rising in my throat. We can't stay here. They'll find us. Her eyes flicked to mine, fierce but conflicted. If I stay, fight. If I go, she hesitated, lowering her gaze. They kill me. Kill you. It was no longer just about survival. It was about decision. Her decision. I reached for her shoulder, hesitating before my hand touched the strange, living glow of her markings. Then we fight together. Or we run together. But no more half choices. Pick one. For a long moment, she said nothing. Her eyes darted to the tent flap, then back to me, then down at her weapon. Her markings flared, then dimmed, then flared again. Finally, she leaned closer, so close I could feel the heat of her breath against my face. Her voice was no more than a whisper, almost lost to the rain. I stay. The single word carried more weight than all the thunder in the skies. Her gaze locked with mine, unwavering, fierce, alive with something I couldn't name. In that look was the truth. She was choosing this, choosing me, choosing a path that might damn us both, but felt more honest than returning to the army she had abandoned. The tent rattled violently as heavy footsteps drew closer. Shadows spilled across the fabric walls, long and sharp. My pulse hammered in my ears, drowning out the rain. Zoe leaned in, her face inches from mine. "Your world," she whispered again, "worth saving. Because of you." I wanted to answer. I wanted to tell her that she wasn't alone, that her choice meant something, that maybe, just maybe together, we could make a difference. But before I could speak, the tent shook again, harder this time. One of the soldiers passed directly outside, their silhouette stretching across the canvas. Another beam of light swept dangerously close to the flap. We froze. Every muscle in my body went rigid. Zoe's hand brushed against mine, gripping tightly, not out of dominance this time, but out of sheer, silent solidarity. The soldiers paused. Their voices rumbled outside, guttural and distorted through helmets. I couldn't make out the words, but I understood the intent. They suspected. They were seconds away from tearing open the tent and finding us pressed together inside. My heart raced, pounding like a drum. Zoe's markings flickered wildly, betraying her anxiety. She pressed her forehead briefly to mine, a fleeting, desperate gesture. Then the shadows shifted. The patrol moved on, their boots splashing through puddles, their engines rumbling further into the distance. The tent fell into silence again, but this time, silence was not relief. It was a countdown. They would circle back. They would search harder. They would not stop until they found her. Zoe looked at me, her eyes glowing brighter than ever. For the first time, there was no wall of mistrust, no weapon between us. Just the bond forged in hiding, in shared danger, in impossible choice. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The storm outside wasn't over. Neither was the war. But in that fragile heartbeat of stillness, something passed between us, something stronger than fear, stronger than doubt. I had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but I knew this. Whatever came next, I wasn't facing it alone. The tent rattled again. Shadows stretched long across the fabric, heavier than before. The soldiers were returning. Zoe met my eyes one last time, her lips parting in the faintest whisper. This night, beginning. And then everything went black. That night was only the beginning.